one way or another. And in modern times, we have ways to discover your family line and your family tree.
Hello, good morning. This is Emmeline Macbeth, genetic genealogist, and I'd like to show you how I figured out that there were two Jacob Burtons born approximately 1810 in Sussex County, Delaware. This is all part of the 1880 project that we're doing at WikiTree's U.S. Black Heritage Project. We're working to record all 6.5 million people who were African American citizens of the United States who were recorded in 1880, because we want to be able to have more connection points across the entire United States, and there are 47 states represented in the 1880 census, and it's the first time that we get relationships recorded specifically, so we know exactly how people are related. So far it's been a fabulous project. We're getting more and more people connected to each other, to their families, and it's just been fabulous fun. And right now we're concentrating on Sussex County, Delaware, because we want one county finished for every single state, and we finished all the states so far except Delaware, so this is our last county to complete. So I was helping in Cedar Creek to finish the Cedar Creek town, and I started with this 1880 census for Jacob Burton. And here he is, born about 1810, Cedar Creek, Sussex County, Delaware. And here he's with his Susan, his wife, daughter Mary, son-in-law A. Anderson, daughter-in-law Emma Anderson, so A. Anderson's wife, and then their son, John Anderson. Okay, fabulous. So over on the right here, Ancestry tends to give you hints of other documents that may also be Jacob Burton. And I do use these because a lot of times they're spot on, and they're great, and they quickly help me get to the other documents for the same person. About 25% of the time, they're absolutely not the same person, so you have to be very, very careful when using these hints to make sure you have the right person, and I'm going to show you exactly why right now, because this is what happened. So I use these hints to bring up these other documents for Jacob, and I brought up the 1850 census for Jacob. Here he is, click on Jacob again. Born about 1800 in this census record. Now, it's common to see an age variation of anywhere from 10 to 20 years on some of these documents, so that doesn't concern me. Cedar Creek, Sussex, Delaware, so it's the same person, right? And here he is with a wife, Letty. Now, I wasn't concerned that it had a different wife, because this is a very common occurrence. They'd have one wife earlier on, and then she would die and he would remarry, so you'd see a different wife later. So at this point I'm like, yeah, this is definitely the same person. Here's the kids listed: Sarah, Lydia, Susan, James, and George. Now this is an 1850 census, you'll notice, which means because he was black in 1850, that this was a free family living in Delaware. Okay, so then I go to the 1860 census, and here's Jacob, born about 1809. Same Jacob, because here he is with his wife Letty, Sarah, George, Susan. Remember, we have Sarah, Lydia, Susan, James, George. They're a slightly different order. Susan, James, and then Emma, age 1. And then I go to see, that's the 1860. So I go to the 1870, and at this point the kids are all gone, and it's Jacob and Letty, and here's Emmy, now 15. So I assumed I had all the basic documents, right? I have 1850, 1860, 1870, and I go back over here, and here he is in 1880 with wife Susan, and it says daughter-in-law. That's actually their daughter, Emma. And I assume, okay, Emmy, we saw that name, right? And Mary's a very common name, but we had Mary, so I assume this was the right person in all these census records, same person. So I created the profile for Jacob over here on WikiTree, married to Letty, and I added all his records, right? And I thought, okay, we're good. So then I went to create Letty's profile. Now I knew her name was Jefferson because of the kids' records, death records. They had her last name as Jefferson. And I started adding her records, and look what happened when I clicked over to her name. Guess what pops up? An 1880 census. And I'm like, wait, what? Because I assumed she was dead in 1880 because we had this 1880 census over here for Jacob and Susan. So I pull up the 1880 census. Here's Jacob Burton, 1810, Delaware, in the household with his wife Letty. And the alarm bell started to go off for me because I was like, wait a minute. If Letty's still living, how is it we have Jacob over here with Susan? Was he with two women at the same time? Because sometimes that does happen. A man will be in two households at the same time. It's a little bit more rare, but it does happen. Or did Letty die the same year in 1880, and then he quickly remarried to Susan? So one of the first things I did was I went and I looked at the date of the census. And it says this was enumerated on the 22nd day of June with Letty. And I went over to this one. And this was enumerated on the 9th day of June. Okay, so these are going to be two different people, right? Because the one with Susan was before the one in Letty, and they were both in the same month. So it's not a case of where Letty died and then he remarried. So what I did is I went to Susan, and I looked over to the side to see if we could find more sources with Susan in the household. And sure enough, we have, starting with 1850, we have Jacob and Susan. Now, here's confusion. Their kids are named some similar names. We had Lydia over with the other Jacob. We had James with the other Jacob. You can see how it's really easy to get these confused. So then I found the 1860 census. And here's Lydia, James, Mary, Susan, Sarah, Catherine. Okay, so we do have some slightly different names from the other family. And then here we are with the 1870 census with Jacob and Susan. And there's Sarah. And here's where the Emily or Emma comes in. And then we have George and Mary. So I realized, and then I found a death record as well for this James Henry Burton. Now, when I actually found this before I found the 1850 through 1870 census, and I was like, who's James Henry? He's not on any of the census records with Jacob and Letty. And if I pull up his death record, it says that his mother's name was Susan Davis. And if you go to, I believe it was the 1850 census, there's James right there on the 1850, and there's James on the 1860. So that is when I realized I definitely had two different Jacobs. Crazy enough, they were the exact same age, both living in Cedar Creek, Sussex County, Delaware. I bet they knew each other. I wondered if it was a big joke about the two Jacob Burtons. But I was able to sort them out by comparing side by side all the records and seeing that they were both at the same place at the same time, but with two different, definitely different wives and a different set of children. So now I have this Jacob Burton with Letty on WikiTree, and I have this Jacob Burton. I haven't added his wife and family yet because it took me a while to sort them out. And in the notes, I made sure to put that these are not the same people so no one confuses them the way I did. But you could see how easy it is to confuse two people with each other and use their records. Now, I also found an 1830 and 1840 census for Jacob Burton in Sussex County, Delaware. I don't know which of these two Jacobs these belong to because they didn't have names of the kids and wives on those census records. They just had tick marks for ages. So I put these on both of their WikiTree profiles, and I said, it could belong to either of them. Maybe one day somebody will take the time to sort this out. So that is how I figured out that there are two Jacob Burtons, and a cautionary tale of making sure you have all the records for a family and you study the family together. And that's how I figured out that there were two different Jacob Burtons as I was looking at the wives and children, and I realized these are two completely different sets, completely different families, and which means we have 2 different Jacob Burtons. So be careful out there when you're picking up your sources.
We're all connected one way or another, and in modern times we have ways to discover your family line and your family tree.